Thank you. Hey guys, my name is Kylie Davila. I am a senior Ruby ambassador, and tonight I'm going to be leading you guys on chapters 5 and 6 of Atomic Habits. And this book is so fantastic. My best friend in upline, Natalie, I remember her telling me I had to read this because she's like, it changed my life back in December. And so anyways, it has been a really great book. I have been recommending it to everybody. And okay, so kicking off chapter 5, it's titled The Best Way to Start a New Habit. And I kind of started my notes with motivation is overrated. What we need is clarity. And I keep seeing that phrase over and over, motivation is overrated. And it was like, I really like that. I just circled that everywhere. Because oftentimes I find myself, or in the past was like, man, I just don't have enough motivation, or, something's wrong with me. And so I really, really like that. And so the way he kicks it off, he has some research that was done back in 2001 from Great Britain. And there's 3 groups in this study. So the first group is called the control group. And they were simply asked to track how often they exercised. Okay, so that was the first group. The second group they had was called the motivation group. They did the exact same thing. They were asked to track how often they exercise, but then they also were to read the benefits of working out. And the researchers also explained how exercise could reduce the risk of coronary heart disease and improve heart health. So that's like the motivation part. So then you have the third group, and they got the exact same information as the first and second, but then they were asked to formulate a plan for when and where they would exercise over the following week. So they filled out this sentence. During the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on blank day at blank time in blank place. So this is called the implementation intention, which is the plan you make beforehand about when and where to act. So this third group, compared to the first 2, had crazy results. And it's kind of crazy to me, not only was like the difference between the groups crazy, but the first and second group almost had the exact same results. They scored between 35 and 38%. That it was those who exercised at least once per that week, 35 to 38. So there was not a huge difference between the first 2 groups, which again goes back to that motivation thing where I thought motivation was everything, but yet they're still the same. However, the third group that was asked to put in place the day, the time, the place, their result was 91%. And I was like blown away. That is huge. That's not even like a 5% or 20%. Like that is a huge difference. So that right there is like shocking that if you put this in place, like set an actual plan, that is what is going to get your results. So the punchline is clear. People who make a specific plan for when and where they will perform a new habit are more likely to follow through. So many people think they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. So that little implementation intention, that little thing, that's what gives you the clarity. So on page 71, he said, we tell ourselves, I'm going to eat healthier, I'm going to write more, but we never say when and where these habits are going to happen. We leave it up to chance and hope that we will just remember to do it or feel motivated at the right time. So many people, they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. It's not always obvious when and where to take action. So some people spend their entire lives waiting for the time to be right to make an improvement. So there you go. There's like what you're lacking. It's the actual plan to like put this into action. So when planning to start something, I love that he mentioned this because I think when you get into personal growth, it gets a little bit easier. Like we're not waiting for, like we're kind of learned or taught to not wait until at like a specific time, right? Like, we don't want to wait till tomorrow. We want to act now. But we are in the people business, and we do have this reset. We have these products. And so I love that he does mention, like, hey, if you're wondering when is the best time to get started, you can look at the first of the week, the month, and the year. So obviously, I would not be waiting until the next year at this point to get somebody started, right? At the beginning of the month, we could definitely do that because July 1st is coming around. And if they order right now, you can be like, hey, it's the beginning of a month. But I like that he mentioned this because now with this reset, if somebody orders it, it might be really great to get them started on a Monday at the beginning of the week. And he says people are more likely to take action at those times because hope is usually higher. If we have hope, we have reason to take action. A fresh start feels motivating. He also kind of like wrapped up that before we get into habit stacking. He says, give your habits a time and space to live in the world. And I highlighted that and like wrote it down. Give your habits a time and space to live in the world. So we kind of get down to habit stacking. And I had to look up how to pronounce Diderot. I feel like that sounds so country. Does that sound hick? Natalie's like, no, but she's from Texas too. Actually, Oklahoma. She's down here. She's probably like, you're good. And everybody else is like, you sound so country. But so Diderot. So this is on the bottom of page 72 if you have the book. And the Diderot effect is the tendency for one purchase to lead to another. And it actually talks about this guy, this Diderot guy. And there was this Russian, Catherine the Great, the Empress of Russia. So Diderot was like one of the co-authors of the encyclopedia, but he was really poor. And she loved books and she enjoyed his encyclopedia. And then she offered to buy his personal library for a certain whatever amount of money. And so here he came upon money after being poor, and he had bought this robe. And then once he got this really nice fancy robe, he felt like nothing else fit in with this robe. So then he bought a new rug, which led to another purchase, which led to another purchase. And so the Diderot effect states that obtaining a new possession often creates a spiral of consumption that leads to additional purchases. It's a chain reaction of purchases. That can actually be like, if you think about, we just came back from convention, right? And we need to buy an outfit for something. And somehow that outfit leads to like new everything. Sometimes even a new like underwear or something like that. Like you start with something and then you're going to buy something else. It's just like a chain reaction. And so many human behaviors follow this cycle. You often decide what to do next based on what you have just finished doing. So no behavior happens in isolation. Each action becomes a cue that triggers the next behavior. On the bottom of page 73, he mentions like going to the bathroom that leads to washing and drying your hands, which reminds you need to put the dirty towels in the laundry. So then you add laundry detergent to the shopping list and so on and so forth. So it's like one thing just leads to another and another. Why is this important? When it comes to building new habits, you can use the connectedness of behavior to your advantage. One of the best ways to build a new habit is to identify a current habit you already do each day, and then stack it onto your new and then stack your new behavior on top of it, which is the habit stacking. So my first question that I kind of want to open up to you guys is, what are some ways that you guys have implemented habit stacking into your lives? And if you've already started this, how have you noticed big changes or seen it to be fruitful?
So a habit that I started doing was I would, as soon as I drop off my kids to school, I would go to the gym on the way back. That was like a part of my habit. I was doing a carpool with a neighbor and they were like, hey, how about I do morning and you do afternoon? And I was like, no, that will never work because I already have my habits stacked on that, straight up. Otherwise, I won't get my workout in and it won't be a good time of day. So it kind of, yeah, that's what I do. just one of my habits.
Yeah, that's really good. And that also touches on a little bit, because I don't think I wrote to go over it, but and maybe I did, I don't know. But he says don't stack it onto something that's not going to be consistent with the frequency you want to do it. So if it's like working out, and you stack it on something that's only going to be done once a week, then that's just not going to be great. But you've done it onto something that's going to be your Monday through Friday, or like a regular schedule. So it really sets you up for success with the frequency that you actually want the habit to take place. Does anybody else have feedback on that?
So I did this totally before I even realized it was a thing with the book, like with my daily routine with my kids. I would do lunch and then we would do our routine through that. And then we'd have a set of chores that we do literally every day before naps. As I was walking up the stairs, I'd vacuum the stairs, and then, just so many things. And just reading that, I'm like, well, no wonder I'm able to keep these certain things that I do like that in order. Apparently it makes sense. So I was like, okay, this totally works. I need to do this with other things in my life.
Yeah. I even thought about at convention. So when I have like my makeup and my hair done, I just feel better. I feel more confident. I feel like, I don't know, I'm just ready for the day. And while I was at convention, you have to get ready in the morning because everything is early, right? And so I would get up, obviously go to the bathroom, put my contacts, brush my teeth, and then immediately start on my makeup. And then I was just ready for the whole day. And I was like, man, when I get home, I should do the same thing, because what ends up happening if I don't have a call or something like that, I get done with all of that stuff and then I just go on, and then it's like 3:00 in the afternoon. So then I'm like, well, why would I do my hair and makeup now? That's so dumb. But then it's like, if there's an opportunity to jump on a call or do anything like that, or make a video, not that you have to be completely put together. That's not what I'm saying, every day of your life, but it just makes me feel better. So I was kind of like, this is a habit maybe I could start, because then no matter what happens throughout the rest of the day, I feel confident, makes me happier. I love my makeup. So anyways, that was something that I actually was thinking about. And my second question, coming off of habit stacking, because habit stacking can be both positive and negative. And so can you recall a time where a habit stacking happened in your life that created a negative habit for you? Or like the same way that you would stack this, like, have you guys noticed it go in the other direction?
So for me, I'd say this past winter, there was a specific show that I would watch on Netflix. Like after I did all my work, I would reward myself by watching an episode of this show. But where it was bad was I started to eat I think it's called like Smart Pop popcorn or Skinny Pop popcorn. That's where it got bad, because, you're supposed to only eat like 1 cup of it, and I wasn't eating 1 cup. So that's where the habit was bad, but it literally became like a nightly thing. So obviously I stopped that. But yeah, that would be for me, that's an example of what you're trying to say.
Yeah. And what's crazy is like these, because he talks about it, these can be like subconscious or conscious. Like, it's not that you were like, oh, I'm creating this habit and it's going to turn into this whole thing. It literally was just one thing, and then all of a sudden it just started to reoccur. But it can also go, in the negative direction. Anybody else have an example? Okay. Well, I was really thinking about this, because I was like thinking about my own life. What are some ways that this is like stacked? And just one bad habit that kind of stacked onto something. So when I worked years and years ago at this spa, I was doing my residency, or whatever you call it, and internship. I guess residency is like for doctors and I don't know, whatever. So my internship, And I was at this spa, and downstairs they had this really good cupcake place. And so every day I would eat my lunch and then I would walk downstairs. This just was like one day thing, right? I went downstairs, I saw these like amazing cupcakes. I got it. It tasted amazing. And then the next day I was like, oh, I'm going to do the same thing. And all of a sudden I created this habit to where every single day I was like having lunch and then walking downstairs. And this was just not a good habit. Like, but it was crazy the time. And then literally as soon as I finished my lunch, I found myself craving to go downstairs and eat this cupcake. It was the exact same cupcake every day. And so I thought about that, how I had created this habit, and without even realizing it, that it was going to turn into a habit. Something else would be like before, when my husband would leave on deployments or trainings, anything like that, I would find myself starting to do things that like I normally wouldn't do, like going to bed later or even watching TV that I don't even watch. I would find myself like picking up habits like that. And all of a sudden at the same time every night, I would fall into like, oh, I'm going to watch this, something like that. So those are just some specific examples that I noticed. So yeah, I think, let me see if I have anything else when it comes to habit stacking, because that was really a big aha moment. So after current habit, I will blank the new habit. So that's what the habit stacking is. The key is to tie your desired behavior into something you already do each day. So that kind of goes off that. He also says to select the right cue to kick things off. The implementation intention that we talked about before. So that is when you state the time and the place for a behavior to happen. So that's what we talked about at the very beginning. But then habit stacking, it already has the time and the location built into it. So that's the difference between that implementation intention and the habit stacking. So consider when you're most likely to be successful, be specific. And then how he ends this chapter is the first law of change is to make it obvious. Okay, so moving on to chapter 6. Let me flip there. So again, motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more. So environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Your habits change depending on the room you're in and the cues in front of you. At the top of page 83, he says, despite our unique personalities, certain behaviors tend to arise again and again under certain environmental conditions. In this way, the most common form of change is not internal, but external. We are changed by the world around us. Every habit is context dependent. So I had another question here. What are some examples of how your everyday environment shapes your behavior? This could be room to room, place to place, or what are some examples of how your everyday environment shape your behavior? If anybody has feedback.
I'll jump in because it stuck out to me on page 86 when he was talking about the apples, and he put them in the crisper drawer, and they would always go bad because he couldn't see them. And so he bought a bowl and he put them on his counter, and then he started eating the apples because they were visible. And I love that he said that, because I always tell my customers, like, put your morning products by your coffee pot and then put your like on your nightstand. And that is when you take them. It's very easy because they're visible. If you lock them behind a cabinet, you tend to not see them and it's easy to forget. So I really like that, making things visible and implementing it into your life and putting it on your counter or putting it on your dashboard of your car, or even putting sticky notes on your computer, something that you see every day, can make a habit easier to follow. So I really like that on page 86.
Yeah, I thought the same thing about the apples because I was like, that is me. I find like stuff in the fridge. I'm like, oh, it's like way beyond expired. And I'm like, well, that was a waste of money. I did not eat it. Anybody else have any examples there?
Well, I will jump and say, like, example, like as a fitness instructor, for example, like I've been teaching fitness classes for so many years, but if I have a choice to work out at home, I'm not gonna get my workout as great as I will go to the gym and do workout there. Just as many people, like when they come to the gym, the habits completely different than workout at home, especially when COVID happened. That's definitely shows a lot of our behaviors, because I have so many clients coming and they say like, hey, I try to work out at home, but it's not happening. It's not the same. So when you go into the gym, it's definitely completely different atmosphere there, make you do more work, more kind of like, you put in more effort into your work there.
So like with me shaping my environment, I'm a snacker. So I keep my snacks like locked up in the pantry or in my office. I try not to have too many snacks around because if I see it, I'll eat it. So that's something that I do intentional to try to shape my environment.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And I mean, at the bottom of 84, he goes into detail about how our sight, like what we see, how it impacts us. So he says the human body has about 11 million sensory receptors. Approximately 10 million of those are dedicated to sight. Some experts estimate that half of the brain's resources are used on vision. Given that we are more dependent on vision than any other sense, it should come as no surprise that visual cues are the greatest catalyst of our behavior. So for this reason, a small change in what you see can lead to a big shift in what you do. And I was like, that's crazy. Out of 11 million, 10 million of them are dedicated to your sight, which is, it goes back to like a quote I'd seen that I really love, because your overall health is not just what you eat. It's like what you hear, it's what you see. So it goes on to like even what you watch, who's speaking to you, who's in your inner circle, stuff like that. But I love that it mentions this visual cue because it's very, very important. And my last question that I had that kind of goes off of that. So thinking back to your childhood, can you think of specific environments that shaped your habits? Have any of those habits carried into today? So like go way back to your childhood, think about all your environments, even if it's from school, from home, a caretaker, something like that. Can you think of any specific environments that shaped your habits, and have any of those habits carried into today?
Yes. That hit me right there because and I'm seeing it now because I'm doing the reset. When I was younger, a huge thing when I would get home, get off the school bus, was watching TV, Gilligan's Island or whatever, and having snack, always having something to put my hand into. And it has carried over. And I've noticed it now more because when I started my reset, I had a bag of chips, chickpea chips, but chips nonetheless. And I had to ask her, I was like, take these and put them up now, because that's something that it's a habit for me. Even I'm not hungry, but it's something I've always done. And so after this reset, that's going to be a habit, is I've got to get a handle on the snacking thing. So I'm going to have to put them away. Plus, I wanted to say something real quick about the question you asked right before. I always made fun of my mom because she would post on the refrigerator or her mirror little sayings, inspirational sayings or pictures of like her when she was smaller or when she was really dressed up. And I always thought that was so crazy. But since I've come back from convention, that's something that I'm trying to implement. I'm going through my old magazines and going through my quotes, and I'm posting them just in little places that I can see every day, just as like a cue to get me to stay motivated and to do better, I guess. But yeah.
That's so good, Leslie. Like, so good.
I love that. I definitely have post-its of my like favorite quotes on my desk, and I write things on my mirror, and writing things places that I can read them has been huge. I always talk about writing my pain points on my bathroom mirror and reading it day after day after day after day to get more clarity and to get me into action. Seeing that it became ingrained in me, you know, and it became very, very clear. And even now, all of my little post-its that I have, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, because then I get too many post-its. Like I have too many post-its and I'm overwhelmed by the amount of post-its, so much so that my husband put a post-it on my desk for him. And I was like, this post-it gotta go. I can't deal with a single more. I was like offended. Like, how could you add a single more post-it of yours? Go find your own post-it garbage heap for yourself. So anyways, I know I need to minimize on the post-its, but a few good ones is good, you know? So
That's awesome. I love him. Like, Nick, get your own space for your post-its. Anybody else? I can't see everybody, so if there's anybody that like unmutes that wants to speak, hopefully I don't like cut you off at any point. Anybody else have any examples?
I was here. I was gonna add just, well, back to the other question too, but I guess some things at childhood, not that they've been really negative, but I mean, we grew up, you know, I think placed an emphasis on things like around the dinner table, which is, you know, that's obviously a big thing we do now with family and time like that. And then just like Saturday morning cartoons, even with my kids, like, I don't know why it became such a habit through my childhood that I'm like, this is fun. Let's still do this, kids. You can watch cartoons Saturdays. So it's funny reading that and just thinking into some of those things. And then I was going to say the last question we had talked about, the water thing, fill up a few bottles. I do that. And that is like amazing. So if you don't do that, it's definitely worth trying to put around your house and be drinking water. And then when he says about mentally assigning our habits to locations, like I'm always saying, like, I cannot work in my office, you know, unless it's clean, like everything's real clean, organized. And I will say that I went out, and my kids should be in bed by now, but it's been a zoo here. But like, I bought these chairs that I'm sitting in, and I swear I have been like more productive, could think better because of a chair. And I'm like, how does this happen? Like, the sunlight coming in, like the computer, phone working. So he definitely makes good points about how in your environment and what's going on, that matters with, you know, productivity and everything that you're doing. So yeah, I love this.
Yes, I had no idea that our environment was so important, but it makes sense. And some things that I was even thinking about. So I'm back at my parents' house, and, you know, he talks about like your environment, like no matter your personality, whenever you step into your environment. So I'm here, right? And I find myself wanting to gravitate back to old habits that were from like a long time ago. And they do go back to visual things. So it may not be the exact same thing I would eat or grab for, but it's like pretty, I don't know, my parents keep a lot of sweets or soda, stuff like that here that we don't even keep at my house. Like, we literally just have water at my house. And so when I come here, it's like all of a sudden I'm like tempted to grab a sweet that I wouldn't eat ever, that I don't even have. I haven't had for years, or the last time I've been at my parents' house. So I find myself in this environment, and it's like all these like habits that are from a long time ago start creeping back in. And so this was even like, whoa, yeah, this is crazy. So I think at the bottom of page, yes, at the bottom of page 84, he says, you don't have to be a victim of your environment. You can also be the architect of it. Loved that a lot. And then on page 87, the context is the clue. So we mentally assign our habits the location in which they occur, the home, the office, the gym, which is what you were hitting on. And each location develops a connection to certain habits and routines. So he says, stop thinking about your environment as filled with objects. Start thinking about it as filled with relationships. So he says, you know, for one person, her couch is the place where she reads for an hour each night. But for somebody else, the couch is where he watches television, eats a bowl of ice cream after work. So all of our objects in our spaces, we have relationships with them. And so that also goes into when we're wanting to create a new habit. He says that it's easier to associate a new habit with a new context rather than build a new habit in the face of competing cues. I thought that was really great. So if you are wanting to create new habits, you know, if you go to the exact same place to work, because he even mentions that your thought pattern is connected to that, like whatever. So if you're in this like really negative thought pattern, or you're down or this and that, try going to a new environment when you're going to work or something. Like when you want to create something new, try to create new context around it. At the bottom of 88, well, I kind of touched on that already, which is talking about your current thought patterns and how they're linked to like a specific place. He even mentions like if you're trying to eat healthier, go to a new grocery store. That's how I was like, wow, that's a really great idea. And then on 89, he touches on one space, one use. I really thought that was useful to just kind of create that one place for one thing. And I think that kind of wraps up what I have here. And I know we're kind of right at time, actually a little bit over. So if anybody else has anything else to add, please feel free to jump in out of either chapter. Anybody else have any takeaways?
I just love how you brought up like having childhood, like childhood, and how that can transfer over. So I grew up as a dancer. I grew up playing softball. I grew up in peak physical fitness at all times. So in my life, not having physical fitness is kind of just not okay for me. But my kids now will always have a sport or some kind of activity that they will do. And hopefully they'll pass that down to keep, you know, it's very easy to just kick back and not really do it. So keeping those habits alive and passing them down to traditions, I feel like is super, super important, especially when it's that vital for your overall, you know, peak physical like fitness. But yeah, that stuck out to me, you know, that you can pretty much pass on habits as long as you're intuitive of what you're passing on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can see that. Growing up, I always saw my dad like supplementing. Like to this day, he takes way more supplements than even I do, and I take a lot of supplements. And so I always say how I saw that, and then that became my habit. So I started supplementing even before I started taking Plexus. I would take all sorts of random supplements, you know. None of them really worked that well together, but it is cool to see how those habits get passed on. And I'm sure my kids take their supplements. They take them on their own. They're like mixing up Slims and hydrates and popping their vitamins. So it's really cool to see that habit, that positive habit being passed on.
Sorry, my family's walking in. I'm getting distracted over there. Well, I think that was a really good discussion, and it is to kind of end, like really thinking about, I posted something the other day that I'd found on Instagram, like saying that even if you don't have this pattern, or you didn't grow up in this specific way, you can create certain habits that you do pass on to your kids, and they can be good. So no matter what, like, you're the creator of whatever you want to do. So next week we'll be on 2 more chapters, which will be 7 and 8. I really enjoyed these. I'm enjoying the book. And so hopefully I'll see you guys next week.